Hello, my name is Elijah Wells, and today's review is Tim Burton's new movie, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Taking place well over 30 years after the events of the first film, Lydia Deetz, played by Rena Ryder, who plays Lydia Deetz in this movie, is now a talk show host who specializes in the supernatural, but upon hearing that her father, Charles Deetz, had passed away, it's up to her to keep the family together, which means getting in contact with Delia Deetz, portrayed by Catherine O'Hara, and as well as a completely dysfunctional and completely disinterested daughter being Astrid Deetz, played by Jenna Ortega, and they must come together to grieve the loss of Charles. But not only they had to do, Lydia now has to deal with Beetlejuice, who's now coming back essentially from the dead again, and after, of course, Astrid has unfortunately opened the path into the afterlife, again by accident. So it's up to Lydia to retrieve Astrid and as well to reconcile with Beetlejuice. The first feature film from Tim Burton in 5 years, if you're not including the Netflix series Wednesday, starring Jenna Ortega, who's of course been her massive magnum opus of a performance. But also, this is the first sequel that we have from Beetlejuice since the first film that came out in 1988. Of course, a lot has changed, particularly with, more notoriously with Jeffrey Jones, who has been accused of being a sex offender and did some really horrendous things with children. Of course, he does not make any appearance in the movie as an actor in this movie, thankfully. But of course, there's the political correctness around Beetlejuice, as he's basically a very crude person who never exactly learns or undergoes any character arc, let alone any development as well. So it became a pretty sticky situation for Warner Brothers to adapt the movie, but knowing Tim Burton's back and most of the cast has returned with Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara as well, but unfortunately no Gina Davis or Alec Baldwin, as they've essentially moved on, particularly with Alec Baldwin, who's pretty much now in huge and heaps amount of trouble for killing a cinematographer in his western movie Rush. Even I myself was a little bit more skeptical about why we needed another Beetlejuice movie, just because the first film ended in a very good, great enough fashion, because it worked really well as a standalone film. But it does make sense if you come to think about that, how the characters have grown up pretty much well after the events of the first film, particularly with Rayona, who's now absolutely huge at the moment, particularly with Stranger Things, Jenna Ortega, who's now absolutely huge with another Tim Burton series being Wednesday. But I think this is also a major appreciation for Michael Keaton as well, who has somewhat of a comeback, was playing Vulture in the Spider-Man films, as well as his Oscar-nominated roles in something like Birdman is also getting a lot of attention as well. Again, and also rejoining the Batman cape in the unfortunate flop that was Flash. So either this was a case of the entire world was interested in the cast again, or it was just a case of Tim Burton had a new idea, or this was a case that he wanted to close a chapter on Beetlejuice. Well, my thoughts on the sequel to Beetlejuice is that it's definitely an outstanding sequel on its own. Speaking about having another Monica Bellucci dream, Tim Burton's current girlfriend is in this movie as well, and most likely going to be in other films in the near future. After the relationship with Helena Bonham Carter unfortunately soured up at the end, and of course Tim Burton had a fairly brief stint with Eva Green, with the movie Peculiar Children, and as well as the movie Dumbo, which was mired in studio interference, and Tim Burton almost convincing himself that he needs to quit Hollywood altogether. But in this subplot that involves Monica, as she plays the afterlife zombie that is known as Doris, who's the ex-wife of Beetlejuice, and of course is a soul sucker, as in when you get your soul sucked by her, then you're pretty much dead. Kind of like a lot of Tim Burton's movies, and of course in the movie Beetlejuice, the designs in this movie leaned very obviously into the more goth area, but in this case with Beetlejuice, it definitely goes in a more camp and a more of a kooky direction, where it does lean into a lot more of a silly direction, which is in a way that really emphasizes the more comical factor of this movie, and kind of reflects really strongly well with Beetlejuice as well. And as well, the designs in this movie are really unparalleled, which Even though there may have been some imitations between this movie and the last film that came out in '88, again, which is again really strongly tells about the movie's really strong influences that could only be rivaled with something like, I don't know, Back to the Future or Akira. And the acting, particularly of Jenna Ortega, as well as Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder, sorry, but their performances in the movie is like really good, and how they've all blossomed in this movie, particularly with Michael and Rena and Catherine, who, of course, were all in the original movie, and how they all matured, and how their character development pretty much filled the void that was 36 years apart. Again, it does go to show about the talks really a lot about the estranged daughter that's after being portrayed by Jenna Ortega, as well as Justin Theroux, who plays Roy, being Lydia's current boyfriend and TV producer of the talk show that she owns. Of course, they all do some really great performances, as well as Wolf Jackson, who's played by Willem Dafoe, who's having a really great couple of years at the moment, not just with stuff like Poor Things, Kinds of Kindness, as well as voice work in like Boy in the Heron, the English stuff. The humour in this movie is basically in the same vein as the first film, as it goes into more crude and more camp direction like the first film did, essentially being pioneered by Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice, who's absolutely phenomenal in this movie. And I think, if I remember off the top of my head, I think he actually has more of a screen presence in this movie than the first film, particularly how he's basically now acting as Lydia's flashback, as she is still recovering from the trauma like from over 30 years ago. And of course, with him having to deal with his very scary ex, and of course having to deal with Wolf Jackson being Willem Dafoe, and how he basically has some really great chemistry no matter who he's with. Like, he's always going to like stand out as the really happy and really over the top and really loud and really brash person in juxtaposition of a really straight characters, like the silly one against the straight character in this comedy dynamic that's somewhat been reminiscent of something like Howard and Lordy in this sense of a word, but this is like some really classical comedy which I do like, and definitely how it does showcase a lot of his kooky humour, and of course explaining his backstory with his ex-wife in Italian, which I thought was really interesting. And of course his humour, particularly in the church scene, how he pulled off the musical in that scene is also really good. And something that I found extremely surprising that Tim Burton really did stick to his guns this time around is that he used stop motion animation as juxtaposition to CGI imagery, particularly explaining why Charles was killed off, being it was because of a plane accident, then survived that, but was eaten by a shark, which, if you put two and two together, it does make sense considering what Jeffrey Jones has been accused of, and why no one in Hollywood, unless you are part of Deadwood or something, wants to even work with him, which makes sense. And also, back to the stop motion thing, he has done in the more CG heavy stuff, particularly in this movie like The Home for Peculiar Children and Dumbo, and as well as a lot of his stuff like Dark Shadows, and also he's no stranger for like stop motion works, like there's Frankenweenie, there's also like Corpse Bride as well, which does show his favour towards like stop motion work, which is also really good. And also it does show some other stop motion work, particularly with the sandworms, which also are having a very good year with the Dune movies as well. So again, I really like it when it goes to the more old school way of doing things. I'm not sure if it's due to budget reasons or just due to style reasons, which anyway, which is something I do really appreciate coming out of Tim Burton, as he goes back to what made the first one really good. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is a very strong sequel to a movie that, even though I'm not sure if it was warranted at first, I was really reluctant to go back to that world of Beetlejuice, since the first one was just so great to begin with, but I feel like this time it definitely did win over a lot of fans, and as well as particularly me, because I feel like this is a very strong sequel, and at best a really good companion piece to the first film. Like, even though the characters do age gracefully into their roles, and how they all matured, and how they've all got into their lives, and how their relationships either got better or got worse within that time as well. And also the movie visually and design wise is also really good and amazing, and definitely Tim Burton definitely playing a lot to his strengths, particularly with using more stop motion work as opposed to like using like CGI work, and definitely his more kooky and more camp sense of humor, which is basically now a trademark for his more goth classics that are very reminiscent at this point. Like if you say as opposed to Dumbo, his last feature film, like if you give him enough creative freedom, he's going to do whatever he likes, and the results are definitely going to show through it in this movie. And of course, with his Netflix show Wednesday with Jennifer Ortega, who is absolutely huge at the moment and does a great performance in this movie, and so does all the cast in this movie, I feel like this is a worthy companion piece to Beetlejuice. So, in my opinion, Beetlejuice, 8 out of 10. So, what do you think of Beetlejuice? Let me know down in the comments. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and this is Light Wells, and bye.